Welcome back to the Radio Academy podcast. I'm your host, Georgy Jamieson, and this week we're celebrating a birthday. Fourth One in Scotland is 50 today, with the station being launched on the 22nd of January 1975 by Chairman Richard Findlay. Before we hear from my guests, Fourth One's afternoon presenter Garry Spence and their breakfast presenter Boogie from Boogie in the Morning, let's have a listen to some of the station's highlights from the last 50 years.
Radio 4, the 194.
6 a.m. Wednesday, the 22nd of January. This, for the very first time, is Radio 4.
This is Steve Hamilton on Radio 4, the Daybreak Show, right through till 9:30.
January,
It's Radio 4.
so don't go breaking my heart.
East Central Scotland.
Have a good time, good time.
Forecast for Edinburgh 5 and the Lothians for today.
97.3.
We're in the best city in the world. We're in Edinburgh.
There's no place I'd rather be.
Glenrothes and Leven.
Radio 4, close to you.
I feel so close to you right now.
Hey, it's Calvin Harris. I just want to wish a very happy birthday to Fourth One.
We're the Proclaimers.
When Fourth started, I remember the great fanfare.
Fourth One was the first radio station we ever got played on.
All of us at school were so excited, the local radio station.
The bright new voice of independent local radio in East Central Scotland.
I'm good, yeah, I'm feeling alright. Baby, I'ma have the best freaking night of my life.
Number 1 for Edinburgh, the Lothians, Fife and Falkirk for 50 years. Fourth One.
It's a real milestone, isn't it? 50 years of one radio station, almost under one name. You know, I mean, it's changed a little bit. It was Radio 4th and then became 4th RFM and then 4th FM, then 4th One.
I asked this on the air yesterday, and I've had some shonky ideas in my time. Who the hell thought of RFM? What does that even stand for?
Well, it was Radio 4th FM. So instead of being RFFM...
Oh, so obvious.
It was RFM. So that, yeah. And it was at the time where everybody was using like really short names for radio stations, and that was it.
How long did it last?
About 5 minutes. But yeah, it's quite a milestone to get to 50 years with one identity is brilliant, and we're really pleased.
And about 3 breakfast presenters. It's been quite something, hasn't it?
I was thinking about this yesterday. I think there's been 5 all in. So there was Steve Hamilton, who did the first breakfast show. He did it. He was the first voice on the radio station ever 50 years ago today.
Is that the guy from the Wheel of Fortune?
I don't know.
I've always wondered. It was one of these myths. Was he the guy at the start that said, please welcome Nookie Campbell?
Let's just say yes. So he was on first, and then there was a little period where it was a fella called Mike Scott. I say a little period. Mike Scott did about 8 years, and then Jay Crawford, and then Darren Adam, and then me since 2003. 22 years, wow.
So you've got to be the longest serving.
At 4th, yeah, absolutely.
God.
Yeah.
Georgie, he loves it when I say this. I grew up listening to Boogie on the radio, so it's really, really special to be here and celebrate with such an old veteran of the game.
Yeah.
Thank you, son. I was going to say, neither of you are old enough to remember the opening, are you?
Well, you're being kind to Boogie there. I certainly can't, but...
Well, I was 4 when 4th started, but I didn't live in Edinburgh, you see. I lived in the Borders when I was a kid, and we didn't have our own radio station in the Borders until 1990. So I remember Radio Borders starting. I was like 19. I was kind of involved from the start of that. But I don't really remember 4th being on. But I remember there being a Radio 4th, and when we used to come up to Edinburgh from the Borders, it was part of the fabric of the city, and it kind of made it quite cool that they had their own radio station, Radio 4, because we only had the BBC stations where we were, so it was pretty cool for it to have its own station.
Yeah, whereas I'm not obviously old enough to remember a time when a city having a radio station was a big deal, but yeah, I remember mid-90s, I think it was, because my family are from down in Edinburgh. I'm from Inverness, and I used to spend most of my holidays here, and I was aware of it when it was 4th FM, and you had it on your Walkman, and that's a portable music device, kids. And you did really just feel like you were tuning into the city. And I know that's every cliche box ticked, but that's what it did for me. You just felt like you'd arrived in a massive city, and 4th absolutely reflected that every single day.
Tell me about the identity then of the station. You're saying how it feels like it reflects the city. It's Edinburgh, Lothian, Fife, Falkirk, that whole area. Just put that into context for us softy southerners down here. What kind of geographic area are we looking at?
Okay, so the number of people is probably about, the TSA is about 1 million, 1.1 million, something like that. So it's not, in terms of, a market, it's not enormous. But geographically, it's quite big. You'd be looking at least the size of sort of Greater London and a wee bit bigger than that, probably.
Separated by a massive body of water.
Yeah, the River Forth is right in the middle of it. But the identity, see, the thing, again, this is a very Scottish thing, and Garry will back me up on this, is that the individual parts of Scotland are also proud of their little corner of the country. If you had a radio station in Edinburgh broadcasting from Glasgow, people wouldn't warm to it the same way as having their own one. And it works both ways, it would work.
Basically, what he's trying to say is Glaswegians hate Edinburgh, and Edinburgh think they're too good for Glasgow. I mean, I can call it as somebody who's not from the Central Belt. And honestly, Edinburgh and Glasgow are they're as different as Manchester. In fact, further, Newcastle and London.
Yeah.
They're just the whole outlook, the feel of the place, the people, both great in their own ways, but it's a very different place. It really is.
But that's also true of Dundee and Aberdeen and Inverness and, every little part of Scotland. And I guess local radio in Scotland compared to local radio as was in England is even more deep-rooted in the community that they serve.
Absolutely. And I noticed that from listening to both your shows, and the sense of humour of your audiences, the kind of interaction that you both get, and how that leads to some of those really funny moments.
That's absolutely right. The listeners are a huge part of it, as we are. And actually, it's been part of their lives. I've been talking about this on air a lot this week, for longer than it has for me. That's what I think Forth does really well. When it comes to events, you're talking about sort of embedding yourself in the community. Edinburgh is famous worldwide for being beautiful, for the Fringe, for all these things that don't really impact locals in the same great way. Best example is when the Fringe happens. It's obviously huge. And I was always really big that when we do our annual broadcast from the Fringe and we're booking the guests, the first thing I'm thinking is, are we booking this for the Forth One listener who lives in the city, who lives month to month, who's fed up with the tourists, fed up of this gig happening, who hears about all the money it raises and makes for the economy, but actually doesn't see a penny of it. Honestly, if you ask a lot of people in Edinburgh, they are so sick of the Fringe, you wouldn't believe.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of the coverage, the BBC coverage, which is brilliant, by the way, I'm going to say it's going for a different social class.
Exactly.
It's going for people that don't live here.
People who live in Edinburgh during the Fringe just want to get to work without being handed a flyer. And so that's, we always think about them when we're doing anything on our radio station here, because we're here 12 months of the year as opposed to just for 3 weeks in August. And there's a big difference. But also, you mentioned the humour that they bring to the shows and stuff. I don't think it makes much difference where you live, to be perfectly honest. I think our audience have been trained well to interact. Do you know what I mean? And I think it's partly because I've been on the breakfast show for so long. People are very comfortable to phone in and talk because, we've been there forever. I think we're sort of part of the furniture. And I think if you're a newer show, you really struggle to get the interaction. And I think it's partly because we've been on for so long.
I think that's absolutely right.
That, Boogie, is the team, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
He's like, yeah, Georgie, it's the team, but it's mainly me.
It's all about me, Georgie.
It's your interaction with Arlene.
No, Georgie, what you're saying is absolutely right. We, in many ways, are propping Boogie up after all these years,
Sometimes it feels like it. But the Scottish humour is very self-deprecating, and we like to have a laugh. We like to put each other down, but I'm allowed to put Arlene down and she's allowed to put me down, but someone from over there isn't allowed to come and have a pop at us. Do you know what I mean?
Again, by over there, he means Glasgow. Yeah, there's a real chip on their shoulder in this city. But do you know what? There, as Boogie says, huge similarities. I think I touched on this at the Arias. I was giving the speech when Clyde won Station of the Year, and I was saying that stuff happens here in this studio right now in Edinburgh as happens at Clyde, and I don't think it happens. In fact, I know it doesn't happen outside London anywhere these days, bar maybe a couple of examples. Boogie and Arlene will talk about something, and you're in the studio and the switchboard just lights up. Like those old videos we all watch of American radio DJs back in the day with their boards. Switchboards are jammed the minute they start talking. Same with Bowie in Glasgow. I call them Bowie calls, I call them Boogie calls. When you're talking about something and you're not necessarily looking for calls, you've certainly not asked for them, you'll always welcome them. You talk about something and the switchboard starts going. And that is such a huge thing in 2024. It would have been 15 years ago, but these days especially, it's so rare. And I think it is ultimately because they've been here for so long. Most people who live in the city, most people who live in Glasgow as well, they can't remember a time when these guys weren't on their breakfast show. And that's something that it's never going to happen again. It's hugely powerful.
And it is tapping into that sense of humour, but that sense of community that you get from local radio.
We do a lot of things, obviously, for Cash for Kids, our charity. Like last year, this is a good example. Last year, I decided just in a moment of madness on there that I was going to run the marathon, the Edinburgh Marathon. We said, well, how can we get people involved with this rather than just listening to the guy off the radio run the marathon? Let's get a team together. So we said, I wonder if we get 100. We thought, well, that's stupid. We might get 5. But, 278 people applied to be part of it. These are people who have never run a marathon before. And that speaks volumes for the power of Radio 4th, is that, we've got that many people who are prepared to put themselves through that huge challenge because they want to be part of the radio station and the story. People from Edinburgh have a bit of a reputation for being quite cold and quite tight. But once you've cracked it, once you're in with them, they're the nicest bunch.
And that helped you win that aria, didn't it, Boogie? The best breakfast show.
Yeah, that was nice. That was unexpected. We never expected to win that. We were up against the big guns, Radio 1, Radio 2. It was, again, all to do with the people that called in, the funny lines that they say, the stupid things that happen on the show.
Like Georgie says, though, you've got a great team propping you up. So well done.
Yes.
We've talked about the awards enough. All jokes aside,
You've won awards, Garry. You've won awards.
Yeah, well, I've tried. We've got actually no figures to hand here. Boogie might. But all jokes aside, I want to talk about the Cash for Kids element because something I'm really proud of, especially given how things have changed and networking comes in. I mean, Boogie and I are working harder than we ever have. But Cash for Kids in every region of Scotland makes more money, raises more money than it has in its entire history. I think when it comes to Cash for Kids, that's the one thing that we would all hold up as the thing we're proudest about. And I genuinely I can't look at him while I say this because I'm paying a massive compliment. There is nobody in UK radio who's doing as much as Boogie. And I want to put that in scale because given the audience, what have we got, 360,000 or something?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Radar next week. Let's not speak too soon. But Boogie, when he does his Cash for Kids challenges, can get involved in a number of ways when you're on air. You can endorse stuff. You can turn up to things. I did a skydive once, raised a few quid. But then you can do what Boogie does, which no one else does because of what it takes and what it involves. And in the last year alone, between the marathon, the super van, which is a concept that I think started here but didn't.
Yeah,
it might as well have. How much has, and let's just be honest, how much has your show raised for Cash for Kids in the last 12 months? Don't be modest.
Probably about more than 500,000.
Yeah, which for 4 hours on the air every day in one local radio market, I think that number to me always speaks to the power of 4th.
Yeah, but it could always be 700,000. So we'll keep pushing.
It is incredible, though, but that's a testament to how long you've been on The Breakfast Show, the community that you've built up with your audience, that they will do these things for you and for Cash for Kids.
Yeah, I mean, a marathon's a hard sell. And there, like you say, there's 278 people who are up for it.
Yeah, but you've got to tell that, you've got to do the story. It's the same when we do Supervan and it's the same when we do things like the marathon. You have to start with a blank bit of paper and plan the whole thing. Say, right, what do we want to achieve here? And then you work your way backwards. And this is the end result. We want to raise all this money for Cash for Kids. How do we do that? Get 100 people to run the marathon and you work your way back and then you start there. That's your starting point. And a lot of things that you hear and see, they don't give it the time. It needs time. You need to tell a proper story arc from the very start, the nugget of an idea, which might be preconceived or it might just be something that happens in an off-the-cuff remark. But you have to take it from the very start to the very end and you have to plan it all and give it time to actually find its feet.
I think ultimately the much shorter version of that as well is that you always put radio first. Obviously the whole point of it is to raise the money and that's why we love Cash for Kids, but you approach it from such a, well, what's the listener getting out of this? Because there's 278 people up for running a marathon, but there is best part of 300,000 people who couldn't think of anything worse and also might find the whole thing quite boring. So because you approach that at every single juncture with what is the listener who doesn't really care about this getting out of it, that's the secret. It really is. And I hear it every single day. And that's why it works so well.
You both mentioned that you're working harder than ever. I noticed the schedule's changed very recently and that your show on Saturday, Boogie, has been expanded. But also, Garry, you're on weekdays, but you've got the Sunday night anthems as well. So both doing 6 shows a week. That's a lot.
6 shows a day.
Yeah, well, actually, I do Greatest Hits Radio on a Sunday night as well, so that's 7 days.
Which is why it works so well, actually, because anyone who's old enough to be on Greatest Hits Radio, they're naturally up quite early in the morning anyway. So here's to a good few more years of you at breakfast.
Actually, and there's no getting away from it. There's no secret. Our breakfast show has recently been networked across other stations in Scotland, and not all of them, but in Radio Tay and North Sound in Aberdeen and MFR Inverness. And our show has been expanded over those markets since the 6th of Jan. But again, we're not sitting in a studio in Dundee or Inverness or Aberdeen, but we put in the work to make it sound like we are. We split link so many links an hour, 3 or 4 links every single hour, all local content, all designed for that market. We're doing 4 breakfast shows effectively every day. Some of it is shared content, but a lot of it isn't. That makes it much harder to, on a daily basis. I'm not just coming in, doing 4 hours and then going home. You've got to put the hours in. But Spence has been doing that for 3 or 4 years. And not only those 4 stations, you've also got Clyde and Clyde One Ayrshire as well. So, that's an even bigger ask, isn't it?
It is, but it can work. I was on MFR when I was a kid from like 16 until 21. Genuinely, I'm sitting here in Edinburgh today, where I am a couple of days a week. I'm in Glasgow the other days, often in Inverness, where I'm from. I do more local content on MFR now in Edinburgh than I did in Inverness. And I know that sounds quite contentious, but it's just a fact. I think the thinking has gone from, is local because you're in the TSA, or is it because you're saying stuff that appeals to the TSA? And that's after years of being told it's not the same, or it can't be, and all the sort of pelleters you take for it. That's the only way I can sum it up.
Yeah, we're not going to go back to a time where there was a full schedule in each of the markets across Scotland, 6 people on each radio station in 6 different markets. It's now 1, but as Garry says, that doesn't mean that you can't be the local station for Inverness, as long as you do the local content for Inverness in a split link, and it makes no difference to the listener, I don't think, really, as long as you're mentioning the travel and the news and everything like that as well. So
I actually don't like, I've just discovered I don't like the phrase split link, because that is the problem. It sounds very like, that's split, it's watered down. It's not, it's a local link.
It's a local link, yeah.
There we go.
There we are. Let's only call them local links from now on.
Let's rename it.
Yeah.
Let's rename it local links. I like that, because it's more positive, isn't it?
Yeah, much more.
And what you've just described there is one of the big ways that radio's changed in the last 50 years. Another way that it's changed is visuals are so important now. The reels that you guys are putting out onto Instagram, they're coming up on Facebook. It was a big part of those ARIA entries as well, when we highlighted it at the festival and we had the sizzle reels and so forth. Those visuals of you guys in the studio, chatting amongst each other, laughing, mucking about, that's a big part of radio now.
It is. That might be a wee bit controversial, but it's not. You have to concentrate on radio first.
Yes, that's why we're mates.
It's radio, and if there's a side product or a something that happens that you can just happen to film and it makes a good thing, great. And then on top of the radio, there's other bits that we do externally which are visual, and that's video stuff, and that's fine. But everything that we do in the radio is radio.
I think that right there actually is the secret, if there is one, because I see so much content from other stations and it's almost like they're filming the link for the camera. And, I've always been radio first as well, because frankly, you can be arsed getting their hair done and actually bothering to worry what they look like every single day when they work at a radio station. But obviously the cameras set up that we've got, that every station's got, it's a huge marketing tool. It's something that didn't exist back in the day when it was all about getting into the papers. Those days are gone, and now it's about putting the best stuff out that will market the product. If you start with what's coming out with the speaker and you end with what's coming out of the speaker, the stuff in between is great and we'll market that. But ultimately, that's what is getting the figures. That's what's building the stations and paying the bills and all the rest of it. It begins and ends with everything that comes out of the speaker.
Yeah. So, social media and the videos, it's important, but it's
got to be the right way around.
Secondary. It's secondary, not primary.
Talk about some of your highlights, your big moments from when you both joined the station. A big moment was when the breakfast team when you changed studios and the breakfast team walked from one to the other during the show.
Yeah, that was fun.
I think that was one of the best things I've ever been part of.
I can't believe that didn't win an ARIA. I mean, how many shows have moved radio building during a link? And we didn't even make it. We had to go to the emergency backup tape, which again had been planned and pre-recorded in case we didn't make it in time.
Well, it's uphill for a start.
And we had to carry a massive cow a big fiberglass full-size cow, and it was so much fun. And we had people, tooting the horns. And it's not even that far. It's only, 300 yards or so?
Uphill.
Uphill. Yeah,
I think that encapsulates, though, everything we're talking about, the fabric of the city. That morning was really quite special. We were leaving what is surely the most iconic radio address in the UK.
Yeah.
4th House, 4th Street, Edinburgh.
Yeah.
And we talked about it on the air, obviously all led by The Breakfast Show. And we headed up en masse. It was like a travelling circus.
It's brilliant.
And we came up through, again, a small part of the city, but it's in a really cool part up to here, the St. James Quarter. And people were blasting their horns, shouting out the windows. We were live on the air, and it just felt... So many things like that happen here and at Clyde where I think, this is like the old days.
Yeah, it is.
This is like the old days.
Yeah.
It's all about to change. It's our last day broadcasting from 4th House. Do you know, if there's one thing I learned from my days as the Huyken District BMX champion, it's that life is like riding a bike. Mm-hmm. You've got to keep moving forward or you'll fall over. Mm-hmm. So that's what we're about to do. We're now on Broughton Street in Edinburgh, which is really, really busy. Look at, we've even got like high-vis security cards. Stop it, I'm trying to speak on the telly. Right, come on, we need to go. Let's go, 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 go. Right, it's now 8:01. We've got 60 seconds to get there. We're not making it. We're not going to make it.
Fourth one, live from St. James Quarter, isn't happening yet. Look, if you're hearing this message, it means that Boogie, Arlene and Marty haven't actually made it to the new place yet. Are they here yet?
Give us a sec. Welcome to St. James Quarter!
Personal highlights for me on my time at 4th. We did Boogie on the Boat 20 times. We took 750 listeners to Amsterdam for the weekend and just partied all the way there overnight on the boat from Newcastle. And then we had a day in Amsterdam and then back on the boat and another party on the way back. And we did that 20 times over the course of the years. You'd think people would get sick of it, but they didn't. By the end of it, they were selling out in like half an hour, And 4th on the Fringe as well, which is it's the biggest show at the Edinburgh Fringe. The biggest single show at the Edinburgh Fringe is our show. It's on at the Edinburgh Playhouse, and we sell 9,000 tickets over the course of 3 shows, and I get to host that. And, that looks good in the CV, doesn't it?
It does. And again, that like the broadcast we do from the Treehouse in Edinburgh, every guest there is booked. It's like we always call it the best of the festival for people who live here 12 months of the year.
Exactly.
What do you see the future holding for you both and for 4th One in the next 50 years?
Right. Well, none of God will be dead by then.
Speak for yourself.
That's cheerful.
I genuinely do find myself far too invested in the health of Bowie and Boogie these days.
Yeah.
Because as I've
if one of us falls over, it's you that's having to get up at 4 a.m.
It's done, right?
Yeah.
I genuinely, all jokes aside, the success of 4th and Clyde celebrating the 50th last year, of course, you can't not put it down to a breakfast show that's been on the air for 20 years plus. It's to say it's a USP would be a massive understatement.
To answer your question, I really hope I can get another 5 years out of it. I've just signed a new contract, which takes me for most of that. And if by that point I can just go, do you know what? I've done it, mate, completed it. And then after that, I don't know, just become a postie or something. See, the thing is, because you're much younger, you've got so much longer on your mortgage left than I have, probably.
Yeah, cheers, mate.
So you've got to keep working for longer.
And I don't have a side hustle and playing Kajagoogoo on the weekends on a Sunday night. So
would I like to go to something like Greatest Hits Radio full time? I think so. Maybe. I don't know.
Oh, playing it cool.
Yeah. Well, they might be listening. I don't want to appear too keen.
A big thank you to Garry and Boogie for their time and celebrating 4th One's 50th birthday. If you're listening to this on the 22nd of January, then there's a special show tonight at 7 p.m. on the station to mark the occasion, or you can catch up on the Rayo app. There's still just enough time for final registration for our AGM on the 23rd of January. You need to be a Radio Academy member, and you can register here. radioacademy.org/events/London Winter Social and AGM. If If you can't make it in person, then you can watch the AGM online. Again, you need to pre-register. There's also just one day left to express an interest in being a trustee for the Radio Academy. We're seeking 2 new trustees, and this is a fantastic opportunity to help shape the future of the radio and audio industry. Go to radioacademy.org/trustees expression of interest 2025 for more details. Also today, 22nd of January, is the last day for Aria's early bird discount. Get your entries in before midnight tonight at radioacademy.org/Arias. Next week on the podcast, we have the first of our Meet the Fellows series, and my guest is Kelly Weil, who was awarded the honour of being a Fellow of the Radio Academy at the Radio Academy Festival last September. I'll see you next week.